Welcome to Real Life, Real Leaders. Today we are here with my fellow network member as well as my dear friend, Karen Hanks Folino. Karen is a transformation consultant at Virginia Tech. She's an investor, she is a board member, and she's a former executive for several companies. And so we're going to get to hear about her career and some of the struggles that she went through along the way. Welcome to the program, Karen.
Thank you, Bonnie.
So we would love to hear your story. So, you've had these high-level executive positions at Cargill and some other companies. And, we'd really like to hear, though, how did you get to these high-level places in your career? And eventually we'll want to hear about the work you're doing now. But let's start back at the beginning. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? And how did you start your career?
Well, I was raised as a small town girl, mostly from Virginia, born and raised in Virginia and rural America, and went off to Tennessee to go to Lee University for my undergraduate, and then I did some graduate studies at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I also have some master's work from Harvard Business School and Dallas University. And so I really was raised small town and then became a mix of city girl after that time.
Sounds good. So when you left your bachelor's degree, then how did you get into your career path?
So, I'd like to say I had a very explicit, well thought out plan that I executed on, but the truth is that's not the case. It sort of evolved. I had a couple of professors from college who sort of picked me out and mentored me a bit and made some opportunities for the master's and graduate work, which I was very grateful for. And then it just sort of fell piece by piece after that point. I moved off to Texas and joined a small family-owned company in the food consumer products world. And then it was acquired by a major corporation. And then I stepped into the corporate world, and it sort of took a path from that point in a couple of different industries, one in consumer products world, and then also in the rail industry world. So the rail industry world being a very male-dominated conservative industry at the time I entered that world.
Right. Most of your companies are pretty well recognized. I mean, I'm looking at them. You worked for Sara Lee Foods at one point. You worked for CSX. That one I'm not that familiar with, but that's manufactured products. Oh, AVP. That's what it was. You were at AVP. Okay. And that
CSX,
was what is that?
Yeah, CSX Transportation is actually in the rail industry. So it's one of 6 class railroads. Yeah.
And then you were in logistics, ConAgra, the Nielsen company, Nielsen Ratings, that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you said Rail Inc. That's where you started getting into the executive positions, where you had like an assistant vice president. And then you ended up being pretty high level when you transferred to Cargill. Well, you were at GE, you were a senior customer success leader at GE. And then at Cargill, you were a group leader for protein, transportation, and logistics, before going into some of these other things like the consulting that you're doing at Virginia Tech. So your initial degree was in business. And so how did you were like sort of in line level positions in these companies, correct?
Yes, I was. Part of my degree, my undergraduate degree, was actually in business education. And so I was teaching in secondary and college. I taught at University of Tennessee while working on my master's for a period of time. And then I never really went down the path of teaching so much in the traditional sense. I went into the corporate line responsibility and had profit responsibility, P&L responsibility. But I have to admit that my education and teaching background played very well in those roles as well, because as you're driving change and transformation, it's a lot about learning new things and new dimensions of of execution. So my teaching background, while it was not in a formal way, actually did play a role in some of the more traditional P&L responsibilities.
Well, you're making a great point because I also have an education bachelor's degree. And so mine happened to be in English education, but it was a good foundation. And, it is so much about learning, especially today.
Yeah.
We're always having to learn new things. And,
Yeah.
as in a pandemic environment, we have to learn and adjust almost daily to get through this. But yeah, that's a great point. So what's been your favorite part of your career so far?
Oh, there are many. There are really many. It's hard to come up with just one, but one in particular, when I was in the rail industry, again, that was a very traditional world male-dominated world at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on site with one of our, it still is. But I went on site with one of our major consumer customers to really drive different change and a different way of thinking for the rail industry. And I took on the full responsibility of the operations, the sales, the full gamut of supply chain for that particular customer. And I had top support from the company, from Burlington Northern at the time. I was sponsored by the senior levels of the organization to go and drive the change. And that was a lot of fun. Because I was in elements that was outside of my comfort zone, but yet I knew I had support. And I had an individual say, the reason we hired you is because you don't know anything. And I thought, I'm not sure that's a compliment.
Right.
And then they really expanded and say, it really is because you don't have a set paradigm of the bureaucratic ways that we have been set to do things, and you're thinking about things differently, bringing a fresh perspective. And so I really, really enjoyed that role among others that had similar challenges.
Well, from a leadership perspective, that is actually something that we do when we go into companies is we talk about the changing of the culture by bringing in outside people. And, even like we had Eric Schmidt talk to a group of executives at one point. He used to be the chairman of the board for Alphabet, the parent company of Google. And he came in to talk to this group of executives. And it was a small group. There were only like 15 of us in the room. But he said, every open position is a chance to change your culture.
Yes.
And when you have a company like that that's really grounded in the way things have always been, it absolutely helps to come in, to bring someone in from the outside. So what are some of the things that you saw that maybe they hadn't seen at coming in from the outside?
Well, one of the biggest things that you get hit with initially, particularly in an operations kind of role that I was in for this particular customer, is we've always done it that way. And so it would make no sense to me. And so I would ask why. And so I remember in the rail world, one of the first things I was challenged with was it was a beer train. The beer train wasn't arriving on time, and so I had to chase down what the issues were, and come to find out that the crew was just sitting and having a coffee or a beer, but they weren't allowed to be drinking on the job. And so they explained to me that the crew died. And I thought, what? Oh my, the crew's passed away. They died. And it was just a term in the industry for running out of hours. But they really got me on that. And but I think what I forced them to do, because I looked at things so differently and didn't have all the definitional history of 40 years, is that we would just ask why, and when there wasn't really a good explanation other than that's the way we've always done it, I helped them to try to change a paradigm of thinking, well, why not? And why not thinking?
That's a great question to ask. And, the beer train, that's essential business. So we need to keep that going.
Yes. Yes, I think so too.
Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA, a human capital firm that provides leadership development for your top-of-the-house executives. One of our services is C-suite and executive coaching. If you think about professional sports, every player has a coach, even at the highest levels. Coaches help us maximize our strengths and achieve our true potential. And just like professional athletes, even the best of the corporate leaders need and can benefit from a coach. Through executive coaching, the tenured coaches at EDA will help you set your vision, analyze strengths, identify opportunities, and eliminate obstacles. If you're interested in coaching for yourself or some of your leaders, please reach out to learn more at www.executivedevelopment.com. So your last job was at Cargill, and Cargill is agribusiness, correct?
Agriculture, yes.
Yeah,
but I was actually in the protein division.
Okay.
And so, but it was agriculture, but it was the protein parts. So they're traditional beef business, but now it had an assortment of protein kinds of pieces. And I was responsible for all of the supply chain and distribution network to support the protein business.
And, that's a little bit, what do I want to say? Out of the paradigm of what we usually think of as women leaders in business.
Yes,
you had that real operational role. What is your advice to women who are, in their minds are thinking, maybe I need to get into operations?
Well, I do think that, for me, it was important. I really wanted to be a cross-functional leader, not just one dimension. And fortunately, with a lot of the rail experience and the consumer products world that I had the opportunity to move across the organization in order to develop and get that full cross-functional review. But operational is a critical piece of it, and a very critical piece of it. So I think women should definitely aspire to be more than just in the supporting functions and get right into the grit of the matter where the profitability really comes forward and the operational excellence happens.
Right. I agree completely. And I think we need more women to take on operational roles, just like we need more women in technology and finance and, fintech and all that. It's really crucial. But also, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, I know your story, and I know a little bit of your story about, some of the things you had to go through. And so, we have a lot of people out there, especially during this pandemic, where they're just struggling. For lots of reasons. And so we want to share a little bit of our stories with them so that maybe we can help somebody. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about some of the hardest things that you've been through in your career, and how did you get through that?
Well, a couple of them come to mind. There's been a lot, whether it's been a gender challenge or a religious challenge or geographic challenge. I mean, they've all been there. So there's been a lot of challenges, but I think that's where we really grow. Our character comes forward and our growth happens. But there's two that comes to mind. The first one I would say was an operational challenge when very early in my rail industry career, I took on responsibility of a very large union part of the business. And I had not worked a lot with the labor unions nor operationally. And so I was pretty overwhelmed from the get-go. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start with listening. I'm going to meet with the key people that are from the union sides, and I'm just going to listen to what's going on and listen to what their challenges are, because they're people, and I had a belief system that no matter who you are, you're special to someone and you deserve to be respected. And so I just started listening, and I went through about a couple of weeks of just sitting down with all of the different levels and all of the different functions. And, I was very challenged because one, had not had a union background. Two, was a female suspect from the get-go. But that listening process, I think, started to, one, open me up to some understanding. And then the biggest issue was the lack of trust for management and about any, so there was a big mistrust.
It's a real us versus them a lot of times, right?
Very much so, very much so. But one of the things I found out, particularly in the shifts of the change of the shifts from first shift to second shift, was that the second shift people would come in and the first shift had drank all of the Diet Dr. Peppers out of the machines. And I thought, well, okay, we've got bigger issues to fry here, but we're worried about the pop machine. And but I listened to that and I thought, okay, if that's their barrier, and management apparently had said, we'll fix it, and months had gone by and nothing had happened. So that day I went out and I got a cooler and I brought in Dr. Peppers for the second shift, and I committed to them I would continue to do that until I could figure out how to get the supply in the machine for the second shift. Small thing, right, but it had huge returns. They felt like I had listened to them. And immediately within 4 weeks of time, there was about a 30% increase in operational efficiency just from the fact that they started responding instead of slowing down the work. They started getting the work done because they knew how to get it done and they had the tools. They just wanted to get some attention. So a pop cooler full of drinks for a couple of weeks absolutely won my trust with them. They started to trust and said, she's going to listen to us. It was a test to see if I would listen and respond.
What a great story. Wow.
It has stood out to me as I've become overwhelmed thinking, I don't know the answers to these big issues and problems. It's just about listening sometimes and hearing what the barrier is that really is quite easy to solve if we'll just be willing to hear it.
Well, and you didn't downplay something that was important to them.
No. And so I really learned that was an eye-opener for me, and that it continued throughout my whole career. But that was a very challenging time because I was completely overwhelmed, or I felt completely overwhelmed with how to get traction forward. But then once I won their confidence, I had the team with me, and they were willing to not let me fail because they felt like I was on their side. That was probably one of my biggest challenges. And then later on in my career, after I maybe felt a little more accomplished, I had a different kind of challenge that really wasn't the work-related challenge at all, and that was cancer. And when you get your name and cancer in the same sentence, that can be pretty challenging because you don't have control anymore, at least in terms of what's going. So that came at a heightened time of my career where I felt like everything had come together. I had the top job that I had been seeking in an industry that I was in. I was new into a whole new state, new company, new community, new everything, and then get the cancer diagnosis. And I thought, oh my, everything's been pulled out from under me now. But even that became a bright spot of the support and the kinds of things that you can overcome. And life's going to continue to throw those challenges, and we just have to be ready for them and be able to keep going.
Yes. I think there's I've not had that, thank God so far. I've not had a diagnosis like that. But I know a lot of people have. And so, looking back at when you got it and, how you got through all of that, talk about it a little bit, and maybe even just some advice, like how, what did you do? What would you tell others to do if you have to go through that?
Well, My faith, I've always fallen back to my faith. And so my faith was definitely a key piece of getting us through that. I mean, I just felt confident that there was a bigger plan that maybe I wasn't seeing at the moment, and I needed to trust, and I needed to keep going forward and taking one step and keep going forward. And then leaning on those that love you, your family and your friends. I mean, they're there for you through that time. And my biggest challenge was I was new with the company and I was wanting to make the best of first impressions. And now here I needed to get on an airplane and fly 1,000 miles away to go get radiation and treatments with after cancer surgery. And I thought, I can't, I'm caving here. I can't keep, I'm concerned about the impression that I'm going to have with the business. But, people have deep values of caring with the company that I was with, and they surrounded me and supported. And I think, again, sort of back to the story I told about bringing in the crate of pop, I think you just have to just listen. And in that sense, you got to put yourself first on caring for the cancer diagnosis and doing your very best to come over it, and know that people are going to still surround you and care even after you get through the battle. So that and fall back, again, for me, I fell back on my faith to say, I know there's got to be a bigger plan.
Right. And what else did you do? I mean, I hear what you're saying about your faith, but also, did you do other things for just self-care? How do you get yourself through it? Did you journal? Did you exercise? Did you go to counseling? Were there other things that you did?
Yeah. So journaling is a very, very big part. And I can go back from this point and look back in the darkest part of my life. And a lot of times, and I do journal. So getting those thoughts out and getting that processed. And then it's real interesting to go back after you get through the challenge to go back and look what you were thinking in the midst of it. Because sometimes our perspective can be different. So I did do a lot of journaling. And I also, one of my employees had a place on the beach that she gave me to go live at, close to, I was getting treatments at Mayo, and that's where my surgery was. And so I was living in Kansas, but she gave me her place to go live at for about 5 weeks that I had to be there for the radiation treatments. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to get settled in here. I signed up for an exercise class. I did go because I knew the radiation was going to try to weaken me. And so I wanted to get ahead of that in strength. So the journaling, the exercising, and I think, the opportunity to try to be close to friends that I knew were extremely supportive of me, that I knew I could call if I needed help, was real important. So I think surrounding you with those things that fill your bucket up is important.
Yeah. Well, and I love that someone gave you a place to stay during that time. Just those are the things that matter, right? It's like, what can we do for others? Who was I listening to the other day that kept saying that? It was, it's going to come to me. Was it Thomas Edison? It may have been Thomas Edison. But it was just like, the more you give, the happier you are. That's, that it really is all about how much we can give and help other people. I mean, everything else is really second rate compared to what we can do for other people.
Exactly. I mean, I think it is a lot. It's all about the people. And, I prefer to give than to receive. And certainly during that time of cancer treatment, it was my time of receiving. But it's all about people and having people around you, whether it's in a cancer fight or whether it's in a challenge in the business world. I think it's about having those people around that you trust and that care about you, and that you can give your best self to them, and then in return they're giving their best self back to you, and that is powerful.
That is powerful. The other thing that you said there that I just want to point out is you said, it was a time when you had to receive. And
Yeah.
when, in our worst periods of our life, that is a time that other people will reach out, and we can either accept or deflect that gift. And
Yes.
what I see is hard for people who've made it to high level positions is it's really hard to accept, even because we don't really see it as a gift. We see it as, no, give that to somebody else, I'm okay. We try to be tough. And
Yep.
that
But you think about
important.
again back to some of the principles of, you hear it's better to give than to receive, and then the blessing will come back. But I think I came to a realization once where how much it meant to me to be able to give someone and see them really ecstatic about what they got, and it makes you happy.
Right.
And so to rob someone else of that opportunity to be able to give and for you to gladly receive robs them of their blessing, so to speak, in able to to have that joy. So I think it is harder sometimes to receive, but it's very important to be able to be gracious in that receiving as well.
Well, it is. And, I think one of the things I hope that people can pick up from this is that it is like a gift. It's like, if we get trained sort of and polished and, corporate polish and how to do things, if someone gives us a gift, how to receive it and all of that, like if someone came in from another country, but we don't get trained in how to receive help,
Right.
especially personally. And so, I think this is an important piece is that, if we picture, like if my friend has cancer and I want to provide a meal or provide a home or something temporarily, I'm packaging up, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about my gift that I'm going to give to that person. And then if I get there and I put the gift out and they say, oh, no, I don't need that, and don't take it, then it sort of hurts your feelings, because
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
I really was trying to be a blessing. I was trying to help. And so, I think
Right.
that's something we can all get better at, myself included.
Yeah. Yeah. It really can. And so you've prompted something. I'm going to step away for just a moment.
Uh-huh.
So, one of my work friends, this is courage. And one of my work friends, when she heard of my cancer diagnosis, had gone home that evening and talked to her family about the challenge that I was about to go through. And her little daughter, who had been given this at a tough time in her childhood life, had said, "Oh, Mom, I want to make sure that Karen has the right people around her and know that we love her, and I want her to have courage."
Oh.
And so they brought me this little stuffed animal that I took with me through the whole cancer journey, and his name is Courage. And she had written a very personal note with it that said, I went through a very tough time. Courage helped me through that time, and I want you to have that as well. Now, if I had rejected that gift, how painful that would have been, and how wonderful and encouraging it has, enough that I would pull this out and show you at this point that courage has meant so much as we go through that, and the symbolism of that. So it's important for us to receive, because you have an opportunity to be able to pay it forward.
True.
But it's reliant on that person receiving.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful story. So for people who are out there just, in their career, men and women who are going through challenges or who are just trying to make their way, in their success path, any advice you have for others?
I think really just being willing to go to the unknown and not feeling like that you've always got all the answers or have all the answers or even know the path to take forward, but being courageous enough to go to the unknown. And my father shared a story with me. He loved raising roses, and I was a daddy's girl, so I'd stay with him. And often, sometimes when they would just start to bloom, and the little buds, that's the part that I loved so sweetly, because they were tight embrace of those petals around the bud. But my dad said to me, Karen, the time will come. Karen Lynn, he used to call me Karen Lynn. The time will come, Karen Lynn, when the risk to remain tight in a bud will be more painful than the risks to let it blossom.
Mm.
And I continue to think about that, and I think it's true as we go through life. So the advice that I would give is be willing to blossom, be willing to take those ventures into the unknown and to learn what you don't know, and to ask the questions and to understand what's the barrier, because sometimes it's a very small barrier, like just needing some refreshments in the pop machine for the second shift. It can be very, very small, but if you don't listen and you're not willing enough to venture out and to hear and to understand the unknown, then you may miss the best of the joy that can be brought forward, or the best of the operational efficiencies that can be brought forward.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess
what a great analogy. Don't be afraid to blossom.
Right. And ask why not instead of always asking why.
Yes, good question. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. These are really rich points that you're bringing out, and I appreciate you sharing them.
Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate it. Best of luck to you with this venture.
Thank you. A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hageman, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.